All right, welcome to this episode of the Comics Multiverse. Today we have a very special guest, Alex Segura, who is going to be writing the new Dick Tracy comic book from Mad Cave, and I believe it comes out in April. And he's also a best-selling author, and he's written a lot of comic books. So I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to let him do the talking. I'm going to bring him in, and we'll find out all about him and his new project.
Hey, Chad. Thanks for having me,
Alex. Again, it's great to talk to you. I mean, like I said, the last time we chatted was, I think we both had face masks on because we were at the con.
Yeah. It was that was a challenging year. Just the first kind of New York Comic Con back after the pandemic. So,
but it's great to see you again. Great to see your whole face. Hopefully, I won't be as awkward as I was last time. So. So, before we get started talking about the book, tell me a little bit about yourself and your journey with comic books as a reader and a writer.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really remember a time when I wasn't reading comics. My first comic was an Archie Digest that my mom bought for me as a kid in Miami, and that really opened up the floodgates. I would go to I would bike to the local pharmacy and pick up comics from Marvel and DC and Dark Horse, and then Image. It was right around the time the Image Revolution was happening, so that was a cool moment. And then eventually I found my local comic shop, and it became just my passion. And I was lucky enough to start working professionally in comics after college. I worked at Wizard Magazine, and then I did publicity at DC Comics. I worked at Archie Comics for a long time. And it was around that time at Archie that I started writing comics as well. I had a career I started writing novels around that time as well, this mystery series. And then I started writing for Archie. And, it's kind of just continued from that point on. It's really been a thrill to have this thing I loved and continue to love as an adult become my career.
That's great. And I always love to hear, how different people got into comics, because even though it's a little bit different, it's usually the same. It's either a parent or somebody that first put it in your hands, and it's always fun to see how different people got into it.
Yeah, no, it really is something that's just been in my DNA since as far back as I can remember. So it's just I can't complain about work that much.
So let's jump right into the Dick Tracy series that's coming out. First off, what is your history with the character?
Yeah, I guess my biggest touch point with the character, my first moment of realizing who he was the Warren Beatty movie as a kid. I remember that coming out, and people maybe don't remember the context of it, but it came out right around the time of Batman, the first Batman. 89. And so I think as an audience, we were primed for more superhero films. We just weren't at the kind of inflection point we're at today where you see them all the time, which is awesome. But I really felt like I'd uncovered this secret character. So I watched the movie. I loved the movie. And that brought me to the Chester Gould strips and the old kind of cartoon serials. And, I remember reading the novelization to the film cover to cover and just being so enthralled by his world. I remember I got to meet Max Allan Collins in person. A friend of mine at DC who was an editor said, "Hey, I know you write crime fiction. I want to introduce you to Max." And the first thing I spit out was like, "Oh, I really loved your Dick Tracy movie novelization." Mind you, this is the guy that wrote like Road to Perdition and a bunch of other, and Dick Tracy a number of years. But so I got really obsessed with the character because he has this iconic look, obviously the yellow trench coat and hat. But I think what really stuck with me was his rogues gallery. He's got this amazing rogues gallery that I would put up there with characters like Spider-Man or Batman, just whether it's Flat Top, Big Boy, The Blank, Prune Face, Mumbles. You could go on. You could go on for days just talking about different characters that are just so iconic looking. And Chester Gould, he didn't shy away from his exaggerated art style was so iconic at the time and so memorable that I think it was really burned into my brain. So I always had a soft spot for the character. I'd always read whatever new comic book version or adaptation came out. And it started to get into the back of my mind around 2015, like what if somehow we got the rights to do this story? And that's really when the idea kind of crystallized a little bit.
Okay. So I think we're, not that we have to reveal our ages, but I think we're probably about the same ages, because I think my first introduction was the movie also. So
it's a great movie. It holds up. I saw it again recently.
Yes.
It's really a great cast. The colors, the Art Deco look. You have this noir vibe, but this very colorful palette. It's really iconic.
So what is your take on Dick Tracy? How are you going to put your spin on the character?
Yeah, so this came in terms of the story and the comic itself. When I talked to Michael Moreci, my co-writer, I knew he loved Dick Tracy as well, and I think I just sent him an email and I was like, are you into this character? Like, it would be great to jam on a pitch. We're Michael and I have very similar story sensibilities as writers. We both have a passion for stories about flawed people in dangerous situations, like just the elements of noir. And we kind of started finishing each other's sentences. I was like, well, it would be great to do like a Dick Tracy year one type story where it's before he becomes this established iconic detective, but it doesn't lose any of the trappings that people love. I think sometimes when you try to pivot the genre of an iconic character, you lose a little bit of what makes him that character or her that character. And we wanted to really retain that stuff, but do a much more grounded, gritty, noir take. But I think once you read the first issue, you realize that all the things that make Dick Tracy are still there. And it's kind of this lost legend, the lost story of how he became the iconic character we know. And it's been fun to play with those toys and also to surprise people. And there's a bunch of surprises in the first few issues that I think people will come in reading and expect things to go a certain way, and they don't. But it still honors what Dick Tracy is. And it's been amazing to see Geraldo Borges' pages come through because, Michael and I knew we were going to write it, and we had this story, and we'd written the first script. And I saw Geraldo's art on this book called No One that Image is producing. It's written by Brian Buccellato and Kyle Higgins. And I was just like, that's the guy. Like he needs to draw this book because he has this perfect balance of great storytelling. You can look at a page and immediately know what's going on. But he also has this command of contrast. His shadows, his line art is really fantastic. And I just knew he would knock it out of the park. So luckily he had room in his schedule and he was into the idea. I think we're just treating this like people treat great iconic heroes like Batman or Superman or Spider-Man or the X-Men. We're bringing that same level of love and care to him because I think Dick Tracy could be up there with those characters if done well.
So you said that your story is more grounded. Are we going to see any of the over-the-top villains that, like we saw in the movie?
Oh yeah, for sure. You're going to see a lot of the characters that are most recognizable. I think I don't want to spoil what happens in the first issue, but you see a few in that first issue, and then we kind of sprinkle a few more as we go. There's the great thing about Dick Tracy is that there's an endless pantheon of potential characters, not just created by Chester Gould, but the people who also succeeded him on the newspaper strip and beyond. So I think it's really what works, and there's a ton of Easter eggs for the big Dick Tracy fans, but at its heart, what we really wanted to do was write and create a great crime comic. We're both fans of like Ed Brubaker and, David Lapham, and just trying to make this not only feel like something that is going to appeal to the Dick Tracy hardcore readership, like people that love this character, but people looking for a fun action crime story that feels cinematic and character driven. But man, it just features these characters. So hopefully it'll bring people in that way too.
Now, you've already expressed your love for the character of Dick Tracy. Is there any one of the villains or any of the other supporting cast that you've really may have at the beginning of it not been attached to, but as you've gone on, kind of become more attached to them and want to explore their story more?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I think if you read the first issue, you can probably tell who our favorite character is. Like Tess Trueheart is, I think, just has so much potential, and she's just such a compelling character and such a sharp contrast to Dick Tracy, who's this rule following like super cop or super detective, and Tess is a journalist that is going to bend the rules and do what she needs to do to get to the truth. And as you find out in the first issue, there's a very personal reason for her to become invested in the core mystery of the first arc. And so she's been really fun to write. In terms of the villains, I've had a great time, and Michael's had a great time working on characters like Pruneface and Mumbles has been a treat.
So I would assume that you pitched this around to different companies. What was it about Mad Cave, besides them picking it up, that appealed to you? That was it?
No. I mean, I've known the team over at Mad Cave for a long time. Mark London and Mike Martz and Chaz Pangburn and James Emmett and the whole crew there. They have a really robust editorial staff, and they also have a really strong marketing department. And I think one of the things that was appealing is that Dick Tracy wouldn't just stand alone as like this one-off thing that they were doing. They have a whole line of, pulp hero stuff happening with Flash Gordon and more coming up. And so it felt like we would be part of a bigger initiative with some other great creators like Jeremy Adams and Steve Orlando and Tommy Lee Edwards. So it really felt like, okay, we're going to be part of a bigger movement, and all boats rise. And they just put a lot of muscle behind it, which I think is really wonderful. And it felt like the book was really going to be supported. And I just see it now in the promotion and in the the kind of general vibe that the book seems to be moving from. So
now I know that your background in love is for crime and all that, but you've written other comic books, across the spectrum of what's out there. Is there a certain frame of mind that you have to get yourself into to, if you want to say you're writing a superhero book? I loved your Night Terror stuff on Green Lantern.
Oh, thank you.
That was almost kind of a gritty, not really crime noir, but it was, had that kind of feel to it. But is there a different mindset that you have to get into when you're switching from the crime genre over to the superhero?
At the end of the day, I go back to something that I think Mark Waid said, and I credit him, and I hope I'm right, but really it's you have to boil down to the character. You have to get to the core of the character and what makes this person tick and what is the biggest threat to them, either psychologically, physically, personally. Like, what is the biggest conflict that we can give them? And whether that's on a spaceship or on the astral plane or in the streets of Chicago, that's the logistical stuff you have to negotiate as you're telling the story. But if you want to have that story really have heart, you have to get to the core of the character and really present a threat to them that is compelling. Because otherwise, if it's just like, okay, this is the villain of the week and he just needs to punch the villain and that'll be that, you lose a lot in that journey. So I don't want to make it sound simple, because it's not simple, but that's the first step. And once you get past that first step, you can start thinking about like genre trappings and things like that.
And who inspires your writing? It can be from any medium. I would assume like crime writers like Dashiell Hammett and
yeah, obviously like Raymond Chandler and Dashiell Hammett and lots of names like that. Like George Pelecanos is a huge influence of mine. Megan Abbott, Walter Mosley. In terms of comics, I love the Hernandez brothers. Love and Rockets is probably my favorite comic ever. Ed Brubaker is a huge influence. Kelly Sue DeConnick. I mentioned Mark Waid, Dwayne McDuffie. It changes every day. Like, depending on what I'm reading, I'm like, oh, that's what I'm obsessing about in that moment. But, I follow creators more than characters. Obviously, there's characters I love, like Spider-Man and Batman and things like that. But the first thing I look at is who's working on it and how they speak to me. And,
So on the Dick Tracy series, the creative consultant, Chantelle Aimée Osman, I guess.
Yeah.
What role did they play? I mean, I'm
No,
confused.
she was a big part in us getting the rights. She was, Mchael, Chantelle, and I got the rights from Tribune, and Chantelle is a amazing editor and writer. We worked together on this book called The Rejects for Interpop, which was a digital first publisher that has since folded, but we had a lot of fun working on that. And she became part of the process for Dick Tracy, and she gives great notes. She gives great feedback. I think that's kind of the definition of what a creative consultant does. She doesn't do the in the weeds editorial stuff of like, hey, the pencils are in. Can you color them? That's a whole different kind of role. But yeah, she's a voice in the room.
Okay. And did you mention Mark Englert, the colorist?
Yeah.
How does because color plays into a lot of the feel of the book, and did you guys was he one of the ones that you searched out like you did the artist?
Mark was suggested by Chaz, our editor, Chaz Pangburn, and I know Mark just through comics. We know each other. I've always admired his work, and I think what he does amazingly well is he's struck a balance between the very realistic, gritty style that the script calls for, but still tips his hat to the Dick Tracy we're all familiar with the powerful colors popping off the screen and the page. So I think once you look at that first issue, you really see how much the art owes to Mark's colors. I think he adds a depth to Geraldo's line work that maybe wouldn't exist if in somebody else's hands. I think he does a great job. And I think Jim Campbell, the letterer, who I've had the pleasure of working with before on things like The Awakened and Blood Oath, and who does a lot of Mchael's comics like Berserker, just really knows, lettering. It's so, I think a lot of people just overlook it. They just think, oh, this is just the words, but it's truly an art form, and it can sink a book if done poorly. But Jim thankfully never does it poorly. He's just like amazing and knows how to pace the book using the balloons, and really his effects are fantastic. There's a spread, a splash, where the lettering is literally like splattered on the page. And I think in the hands of maybe a lesser letterer, it would come off as cheesy, but he does it in such a thoughtful way that it's chilling. And that's all him. We just made a suggestion like, hey, could we have this caption be on the literal page? And he just nailed it.
And I would assume that as of right now, it's like a limited series, correct?
It's an ongoing.
Oh, it's an ongoing. Oh, good.
Yeah.
You never know these things. But
things are announced as ongoings and then they become limited series. But for now, our plan is we're going to tell Dick Tracy stories as long as they'll have us. So
now, is it kind of, I don't know if I want to say intimidating, but with everybody, with the other artists who've worked on the character before, besides the creator, Joe Staunton is known. I think he was he and his team won a Harvey Award for their work. Yeah. Is it some like I don't know. Is it intimidating? Or are you kind of like, I hope I don't screw this up?
I mean, there's always an element of I hope I don't screw this up. I think it's more like we're adding our voice to this chorus of great creators, like whether it's Joe Staton or Kyle Baker had a really underappreciated run that came out right around the time of the movie. That's, I have 2 copies. I've just kind of flipped through that comic so much that I've worn it out. Mike Allred, Mike Avon Oming, like there's been a lot of great takes on Dick Tracy. I think what we're bringing to the table is something different, but hopefully it'll resonate with fans and with people that are looking for a really compelling crime comic.
All right. We'll come back in a little bit I'll let you do a last pitch, but now if you're cool with it, I'd like to do what I call 5 questions. They're just 5 questions. They could be random. Sometimes they apply to what we've been talking about. But,
I'm ready.
So, what's your favorite Dick Tracy gadget?
Oh, it's got to be the watch.
Yeah. Okay. And then I assume he has to watch in your story, or is this before he gets to watch?
Well, he's got it. Yeah.
Okay. Question two. You've worked on a variety of licensed properties. Is
Mhm.
there a licensed property that you like, Dick Tracy, or anything that you would like to work on with, and who if it, would be the creator, like the artist creator?
Oh, who would be the artist that I would work with? I mean, I'd love to write a Batman story. I'm not sure who I would work with on it. I've written Spider-Man, so that was a huge bucket list item. I love the Green Hornet, the Phantom. Yeah, those are the ones off the top of my head.
And which segues into question three. If given the opportunity by Marvel or DC, what, if any, B or C list character would you like to, kind of pull out of? What I'm trying to remember what Grant Morrison called the purgatory or whatever. And
That's a great question. I got to write some White Tiger stories for Marvel, which was a lot of fun. I have a great affection for that character. I love what Grant did, what they did with Animal Man. I thought that was fantastic, and that's one of my favorite comic runs ever. I love a lot of the Golden Age DC characters, the JSA characters, especially the ones from All-Star Squadron. So it would probably be something like that, an obscure Golden Age character modernized in some way. I love Vigilante. I think that's a cool concept in a costume.
I'd read it. All right, question four.
Okay.
Is there you also write novels? Is there a difference between writing a novel and writing the script for a comic? And is it easy to kind of go in between the two of them?
I mean, a comic script is so much shorter. So it's like a little bite of the sandwich, whereas a novel is like your meal plan for months and months. A novel is very much a marathon, whereas a comic script, you have to map it out and plot it out, but you're gonna be done a lot faster. So it's almost, for me, it's one is a nice change of pace to the other. So for me, a novel is like this rolling thing that I live with for months and months and months, and it's a different kind of writing. Whereas I feel like script writing, you're almost putting a puzzle together. Like you look at the page, you break it down by panel, then you break down the panel by who's on the panel, who's in the panel, who's talking. So, and you can only do so many words in so many balloons and so many balloons per panel, and it becomes almost algorithmic. Whereas prose, there's no constraints, which is good and bad. You can write whatever you want for as long as you want. But it's really different muscles in my brain. So I kind of pivot to one when I need a break from the other, deadlines permitting.
Okay. And question number 5. Do you have a guilty pleasure comic book or series or run of comics that you like to repeatedly visit? Or if you want something to read something, is there, what would it be?
Yeah, I kind of take it, and this is not a criticism of you, like the idea of guilty pleasures. I feel like, like what you like, love what you love, and no judgment. I did recently reread Sovereign 7, which was Chris Claremont's, after he left the X-Men. Initially, he went to DC and did this series called Sovereign 7 with Dwayne Turner. And what's so weird about this book, and I say that with great affection, is that it was a creator-owned series that was embedded into the the DC universe. So you have these new characters that Chris and Dwayne came up with interacting with like Darkseid and the Female Furies and Power Girl. So to me, it's just a fascinating relic of a different time. And it's kind of Chris Claremont at his peak coming off the X-Men, which I'm an obsessive of that era of X-Men and X-Men in general. I really love, like many, I love the franchise, but it feels like a fun little detour. And so I reread it recently and it was a blast.
Okay. Was there anything else that maybe we didn't talk about previously about Dick Tracy that you wanted to make sure that people knew about?
No, I think we covered a lot. I feel like it's a love letter to the character. It's at its heart, it's a dark crime story, and it, you know, for fans of really great crime comics, I think this will feed that desire. But it's also, it's on every page, it shows that everyone on the team has a passion for these characters in this world, and we really wanted to establish a definitive kind of memorable origin for him. So I'm excited for people to read it.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time this afternoon to chat. Where can people find you on the social medias?
Yeah, you can, my website, alexsegura.com, and that has links to my newsletter, and I'm on Instagram at Alex Segura Jr., and I have a Facebook author page as well.
Okay. And is there anything that you have in the works that you can talk about, or is everything hush hush?
Yeah. I'm trying to kind of run through my mental Rolodex of stuff that's coming out. Edge of Spider-Verse
don't get yourself in trouble.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, like, can I talk about this? Edge of Spider-Verse #1 just came out, and that features a Spidey 2099 story drawn by Salvador LaRocca, which is amazing. And I'll have a story with Salva in Web of Spider-Man #1, and also Edge of Spider-Verse #4. The collected edition of Blood Oath, my horror crime comic with co-writer Rob Hart and artist Joe Eisma, colorist Hilary Jenkins, and Jim Campbell again, and editor Heather Antos. Just came out. That's my laundry timer. Exciting freelancer life. It just came out from Dark Horse yesterday. So that's the big stuff. And Alter Ego, the sequel to my LA Times Book Prize winning novel, Secret Identity, comes out in December from Flatiron.
Oh, awesome. Secret Identity is on my list of books that I want to listen to.
The audiobook narrator did an amazing job, which is high praise because there's comics in the book. So I was like, how is she going to get the comics onto audio? Like, how is that going to work? But she really did a fantastic job.
Yeah, I just don't have time. It's easier just to plug the book, turn the book on, and listen to it while I do other stuff.
I do it all the time. I'm driving my kids to school. I'm listening to an audiobook, or usually after I've dropped them off, they don't want to hear it on the way there. But doing chores, like, I'm listening to a book. Yeah.
Yeah, my son goes, "Dad, are you listening to another Star Wars book?"
Yeah, it's the only time we have. That's parenting in a nutshell.
Yeah, I'm currently revisiting the original Thrawn trilogy. I'm on the Dark Force Rising. So,
awesome! So good.
And I also enjoyed the one shot you did for the 40th anniversary of Return of the Jedi, the Mon Mothma story.
That was really fun. They did a nice, the crew of artists did a great job. I mean, it was fun to do a very like espionage-y, resistance story. And I got to write Akbar and Mon Mothma and bring in a few characters from my Poe Dameron book into it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's right. You did write Poe Dameron. I ate that book up.
Yeah, that was a fun one. I really liked writing that. It was a huge honor to kind of establish Poe's origin story.
Are you a big Star Wars fan yourself?
Yeah, for sure. Star Wars, Star Trek, comics, that was my kind of DNA growing up and into adulthood. So,
well, then I should have asked you the question: Star Wars or Star Trek? But oh well.
You can love them both. It's okay.
Yeah. All right. Well, I want to thanks for taking the time to chat. And next time you have, something else you want to talk about, then I'd love to have you back on.
All right. I'll see you tomorrow. I'm just kidding.
Hey. All right. All right. Thank you and have a great day.
You too. Take care.